Here we go. So welcome everybody. Welcome to the National Hispanic and Latino ATTC's webinar, Immigration, Trauma, and Substance Use, the Latino Journey to the U.S. Symposium, Where Do We Go to Next? Today's webinar will be presented by Dr. Luis Torres. He is the Dean of Research and Strategic Partnership for the Graduate College of Social Work at the University of Houston and Director of the Center for Drug and Social Policy Research, but I'll tell you more about him soon. During today's webinar, all participants will be muted. The audio will be streamed through the computer, so please make sure your computer speakers are turned on and up to hear today's presentation. I'm going to review a few housekeeping items with everyone. So if you notice that your viewer does not fit your screen, you can expand it by clicking the expand button located in the top right corner indicated by the red arrow. Now you'll see that your viewer is expanded to fit the entire screen. Also, you can collapse the GoToWebinar toolbar on the right of your screen by clicking the small red arrow on the left of the toolbar. And then click the arrow again and to expand the toolbar, and it will expand again. As I mentioned, for today's webinar, all participants will be muted. As we move through the presentation, if you have a question for a presenter, we ask that you use the chat box on the toolbar. You simply type your question and hit send, and we will be pausing and leaving some time for questions and answers during today's presentation. A recording of today's webinar along with the PowerPoint slides will be available at www.attcnetwork.org/Hispanic Latino. Approximately 1 week from today, you can also find recordings and PowerPoint slides from all our past webinars at the same URL, and also you'll see that you have a handout available here on the screen that you can access. One NASDAQ, one NBCC, and one ICNRC continuing education credit is available to those who attend today's live event. So if you're interested in obtaining CEUs from these organizations, please email us at Hispanic at Hispanic Latino at uccaribe.edu. I'm going to speak a little bit about the network. Today's webinar is sponsored by the National Hispanic and Latino ATTC. As of October 1st of 2012, the network has been restructured and now consists of 10 regional ATTCs, 4 national focus areas ATTCs, along with the network coordinating office. As you can see by this map, the ATTC network regions were realigned to better fit the current HHS regions. And on the left of the screen, you'll find that you have the 4 national focus area centers. So we've been providing around 30 webinars through the past years through the National Hispanic and Latino ATTC. This network is funded by the Substance Use, Abuse, and Mental Health Services Administration and serves a critical role in improving the health of the United States. The network achieves this by translating, disseminating, and promoting the adoption and implementation of evidence-based clinical practices and strives to improve the health and wellness of individuals whose lives have been impacted by substance use disorders. You can learn more about the network and its products by visiting attcnetwork.org. So as I mentioned, the ATTC network is funded by SAMHSA. SAMHSA strives to reduce the impact of substance use and mental health disorders on America's communities through its programs and services, and demonstrates that behavioral health is essential to health, that prevention works, treatment is effective, and people recover from mental and substance use disorders. So if you want to learn more about SAMHSA, you can visit their website at www.samhsa.gov. Now I'll introduce our presenter, Dr. Luis Torres. Dr. Torres is Associate Dean of Research and Strategic Partnership at the Graduate College of Social Work at the University of Houston and is the Director for the Center for Drug and Social Policy Research. His research agenda focuses on health disparities, specifically co-occurring mental health, substance use, and medical disorders in Hispanics, and on family strengthening efforts with a focus on Hispanic communities. Dr. Torres is the principal investigator of a 3-year grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to conduct screenings and navigation into care with the goal of preventing mental illness, substance use disorders, and HIV/AIDS among Hispanic and African American students ages 18 to 24 at the University of Houston, and among Hispanics and African Americans ages 18 to 24 in the community surrounding the university. This was the first UH grant to leverage the university's status as a Hispanic serving institution. Dr. Torres is also co-principal investigator of a National Institute of Drug Abuse funded multi-site study examining the effectiveness of recovery high schools in 3 states, and co-principal investigator of the NIDA funded University of Houston Drug Abuse Research Development Program. He is the principal investigator of the primary research project Virtual Reality Cue Reactivity Assessment of Reactivity and Extinction Protocols in Injection and Non-Injection Heroin Use in Mexican Americans, which is examining a virtual reality intervention to extinguish cravings in young Mexican American non-injection heroin users and older Mexican American injection drug users. Dr. Torres, a native of Puerto Rico and longtime friend of the National Hispanic and Latino ITTC, has a doctorate in clinical psychology from Fordham University in New York City and over 20 years of clinical, administrative, and research experience. I'm going to do a poll questioning so that our presenter gets to know our audience, and then I'll pass over the controls to him. So, our first question is, do you currently serve Hispanic and Latino populations with substance use disorders? And 82% of our attendees say yes and 19 no. Next question. Are you planning to serve Hispanic and Latino populations with substance use disorders in the next 6 months? So 77% of our participants say yes, 7% no, and 20% don't know. Next question. What is your current professional role? And we have among our participants 16% social worker case manager, 29% counselor therapist, 6% faculty research or student, 12% government official or policymaker, and 37% other. Our last question. What type of setting do you currently work in? And here we have 9% academics, 37% treatment, 2% research, 30% government, and 21% other. So Dr. Torres, that is so you can get to know our audience a little bit better. So now I'm going to pass over the screen to you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Hold on, I think I don't see the slides. It must have gone up somewhere else.
Do you have them? Do you have your PowerPoint open? Maybe it's there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I have it on the laptop. Hold on, let me pull it over to the screen. Just give me one quick second. My apologies about that. Too many screens, too many monitors, and too many computers. Webinars. Here we go. It's opening.
Okay.
I had it open, but I had it open on a different computer. Okay, can you see it
Yes,
now?
yes, I can see it.
Welcome everybody. It's really exciting to be doing this. This is the first time that we're doing this type of webinar. As some of you might remember from the conference, we talked about how sometimes we go to these conferences and we learn a lot of stuff, do a lot of networking, tap into a lot of resources, and then we get back to our places of employment and the routine of every day, and quickly the excitement fades and our determination to use what we learned fades as well. So we wanted to try something different because we want these types of learning opportunities to have as broad an impact as possible. So when we were talking about how to do that, we thought about coming up with a webinar that was 5 to 10 days after the end of the conference, and that gave us an opportunity to recap what we had learned, connect us to some additional resources, and engage in dialogue with the conference participants about how they're using what they learned. So my guess is that most of the participants are folks who attended the conference here at the University of Houston last week. But in case there are folks who did not attend, please know that all of the presentations from the conference will also be available at the National Hispanic Latino ATTC website. In fact, they might already be available. I'll ask Daris about that later. So we called this webinar Immigration, Trauma, and Substance Use, the Latino Journey to the U.S., which was the symposium. What next? What comes next? So there's a slide of the flyer that we had prepared for the symposium. And once again, thanking our primary partners, the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work and the University of Texas at Austin School of Social Work, and of course the National Hispanic Latino ATTC and the Southwest ATTC, which is the ATTC for Region 6, which is located in Austin, and of course La Universidad Central del Caribe, which is where the National Hispanic Latino ATTC is located. And then all of our local partners. The conference was a big success, and I think it's because we tapped into local expertise and local partners. So all the partners that planned with us and executed to perfection are also listed on the slide. In particular, wanting to highlight Avenue 360 Health and Wellness, the Council on Recovery, they've sponsored the lunches on days 1 and 2 and the various snacks. So kind of the overview of the webinar, I'm going to spend about 5-10 minutes recapping what I think are some of the key lessons from each of the presentations, 1 or 2 key lessons for each of one. And then we're just going to open it up to discuss with the group of participants what the relevance of these presentations are to your practice with a focus on challenges and opportunities. And in particular, since you returned back to work, how have you used or tried to use what you learned? So those who were at the conference will remember that Dr. Teresa Chapa opened up with a presentation that was really kind of a call to action. She presented some data on the Latino population and Latino providers, both social workers and psychologists, and the key message was that despite all of the terrific advances that we've been making over the past decade to increase the number of Latinos and Latinas who are providers, frontline providers in health and behavioral health, the truth is that the growth of the Latino population by far continues to exceed the number of providers from Hispanic Latino backgrounds that are graduating and entering the workforce. So we need to continue those efforts to increase the number of Latina providers, but we also need to continue efforts to train non-Latinos so that they can expand their knowledge and skills and serve the population effectively. Dr. Chapa's presentation was followed by a presentation from Dr. Roberta Leal, which really made come alive the journey of immigration and trauma and all the positive and negative things that can happen when somebody decides to leave a country of origin and launch a new life in a new country. Dr. Leal very courageously shared with us some very poignant family stories about her mother and her father and her siblings. And one of the things that that Dr. Leal's presentation highlights for me is the importance of attending to history when we are assessing the clients that we go come to us for services. Sometimes we get stuck on what the presenting problems are and what the immediate past is, and we have to go a little bit further back and dig a little deeper, particularly when we're working with immigrant communities, about what the immigration journey was like. And if they were born here, what the immigration journey was like for their parents and sometimes even grandparents. It is not uncommon to see sometimes 2, 3, and higher generations later, the impact of the original immigration journey still being felt. The other thing that came to mind with Dr. Leal's presentation and some of the other presentations was an expression that I've heard a senior colleague use several times, and it's this whole thing about la cultura cura, pero también mata. You know, culture heals. We make a big deal of incorporating culture, cultural elements, cultural knowledge, cultural values into the work that we do with clients, and that certainly is very important. But we have to also realize that not everything that is tied to a culture is healthy, and that cultural values, cultural behaviors can sometimes be protective factors, but at other times they can be risk factors. And we have to be willing to dig deeper and figure out when they're one and when they're the other. Dr. Leal was followed by Dr. Richard Cervantes and Daniel Santisteban, who really gave us a phenomenal 1-2 presentation about the importance of measuring acculturative stress. Dr. Cervantes in particular talked about this phenomena of acculturative stress and how it mounts and becomes compounded by other types of issues. And he also shared with us the importance of using standardized instruments to measure acculturative stress. He talked about the Hispanic Stress Inventory and the Hispanic Stress Inventory 2. There's a version for immigrants and for non-immigrants. There's also an adolescent version. And then he talked about the product that was developed by the National Hispanic Latino ATTC, which is called A Guide for Conducting Cultural Assessment of Hispanic and Latino Clients. The ATTC brought many, many copies, and they were available at the health fair, so hopefully you availed yourselves of them. And if not, it's available as a PDF from their website as well. The guide actually includes some easy-to-use handouts that allow us to measure the impact of the acculturation journey and acculturative stress as we assess clients. And then Dr. Santisteban talked about the critical need to incorporate cultural values into programs, and he talked about the development of a family-focused intervention that he's developed for Latino families. Dr. Maynard on day one at the lunchtime presented a very well-received talk, and the key message of her talk was that you don't have to be Latino or Latina. She certainly isn't herself, so you don't have to be Latino or Latina to work well with the population. However, knowing about the population helps a lot, and she talked about how she has spent time in Latin America and made a great effort to learn the language and demonstrates genuine cultural curiosity. So really wanting to learn as much as you can learn about the clients that we're working with. I mean, that goes across all client populations, regardless of where they come from. But it's particularly critical when we're working with clients that come from backgrounds that are different from us. That curiosity of who they are and where they come from, and respect for their values and behaviors, particularly when they might be different from ours. Another key message of Dr. Maynard's presentation was the point that small self-disclosures can improve the therapeutic alliance. Many of us have been trained to use self-disclosure in a very limited way, but particularly when working with clients across culture. Some of the examples that she provided were when they learned that she's not Latino, they just assume that she is, but when they learn that she's not, they want to know how she learned Spanish. and she talks about having spent time in Latin America. So thinking about self-disclosure as a tool that can enhance the therapeutic alliance, of course the key is when to use it and how much, and supervision is very useful for that. Dr. Gallardo then followed up in the afternoon with a presentation about stress, and again brought home this point about trauma matters. You know, when we are working with Latino clients and behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse, many of them are immigrants, and we really have to assess the impact of their immigration journey and traumatic experiences. And we kept hammering that point throughout the two-day conferences because it's a critical point. Dr. Calzada then talked about parenting interventions, and she presented some of her research on parenting interventions in New York in particular with various subgroups. But in particular, she shared some of the data with, I believe it was Mexican and Dominican families, and was able to show that there is some differences between them. So we've always known and have always said that Latinos are not a homogeneous group any more than any other group is homogeneous. But when we see data that shows between group differences, between Latino subgroups, it brings that message home in a very potent way. So not to assume that all Latino groups are the same. Dr. Zayas presented, we moved on then to day 2. Dr. Zayas presented a very moving presentation about the impact of trauma pre-migration, during the immigration journey, and then post-immigration. So looking at this journey in a holistic way. It's a long arc, and not just the problems that present when a client first comes in contact with us. He spoke very eloquently about his visits to detention centers and his work with the children and families in these detention centers, and really, again, a call to action, that what's happening to these families coming from Central America in particular, which are being housed in what are prisons. I mean, that's what they were built for, in conditions that are less than humane, is just adding to the trauma that they've already experienced prior to leaving the country and then on their journey here. We had a panel that Dr. Leal facilitated and included Dr. Kovich from UH Clear Lake, Ms. Howell, a social worker at Las Americas Newcomer, which is a newcomer school, which is a middle school in the Houston Independent School District, and Mr. Cervantes, which is a student at one of the universities in Houston, who has an irregular immigration status. He's one of the dreamers. And there was another very moving panel where people shared their personal experiences and how they impact the work that we do. For me, the take-home messages from here is that the dreamers continue to make terrific strides in school and beyond, and that we need to continue to support them, in particular in this current climate where there's so much uncertainty about what's going to happen to them. Also from this presentation, this piece about cultural knowledge being important. So we need to know about the culture of our clients, especially when we come from a different culture. And then the academic journey, from elementary, middle school, high school, college, that all throughout, as they progress from one level to the next, the needs are going to change, and we have to be attentive to those needs. Dr. Jody Berger Cardoso presented on her research on unaccompanied alien children here in the Houston area. This is a project that she did with the Houston Independent School District. Houston is one of the cities that has seen the largest number of unaccompanied alien children released into the communities. And we really know very little about how they're adapting and the challenges that they're facing as they wait for a court date that might come 5 years later. So it's really important to know how they're developing. She talked about the risks of returning home for many of these children and their families, and again shared with us some of the work that she's doing evaluating families that are in detention centers or awaiting court proceedings to determine whether they get to stay here or go back, and again called us all to action, that we need more people that have the training and the willingness to do evaluations of these families, to work to help their case to remain in the U.S., of course, paying attention to the fact that you need to be ready to deal with the trauma that they're going to unload. And the last two presentations, Dr. Trevino's presentation was a fascinating one because it's not very common that we look at immigration and acculturation and substance use through a psychodynamic lens. But I think he did a phenomenal job in really making us think about how the psyche takes this material from these very traumatic journeys and expresses them, even if the person might be openly saying to us, oh, I'm not having any problems with this. The themes that are repetitive in their dreams are clearly tied to the immigration experience, to the immigration journey. So it's important to ask questions about it and to encourage our clients to share with us, what they're dreaming, which is a practice that's fallen out of practice as we've moved away from psychodynamic models of intervention to more cognitive behavioral models. For me, the take-home from Dr. Trevino's presentation is that psychodynamic thinking still has value in the work that we do with our clients. And finally, we had the last presentation of the conference was a panel by Dr. Haner and Ms. Sasha McLean from Archway Academy and Mr. Emilio Parker, who works with the community, and each of them shared with us their personal stories of struggle and recovery and the triumphs that they have been able to achieve and how much they've been able to give back to the community by engaging with treatment. We have to continue to bring home the issue that treatment works. I think everybody that was at the conference, everybody who's on the webinar knows the statistics about, maybe 10% of people who actually need treatment actually receive it. And of those, the ones who actually receive cutting-edge, evidence-based treatment are even less. And that's a tragedy because we know that treatment works, that it helps people go into recovery. Recovery matters, and that we can actually achieve great things for ourselves and our families and our communities when we take advantage of treatment. The panel also talked about the various institutional barriers that we face when we're trying to engage with the treatment system. So those were the presentations, and as I mentioned at the beginning of my comment, all of the slides are going to be available at the website. So what we wanted to do next was kind of open it up to discussion and talk about what comes next. So I have some guideline questions. We don't have to follow them in any order, so anybody can just request the mic and just share with you which of the presentations impacted the most or has the most direct relevance for your practice. Share with us if you've tried to do anything different since going back to work. I know it's only been about a week, but we know there's a recency phenomena. So when we get back from a conference, we're more likely to try to do something new that many months later. So hopefully some of you have tried to use some of what you heard or access some more resources or talk to somebody about it. If so, what was the result? And if not, can you say a little bit about why you haven't? After we've had some discussion for about 10-15 minutes, I'll talk a little bit more about some resources. So that is, how do we handle these parts? Do people raise their hand and you recognize them?
It might be easier if participants send the question through the chat box, and I can ask you the questions, and then we can have the discussion.
Perfect. So folks can just type your questions or your comments in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody see where the chat box is?
Mm-hmm.
So I need a little.
I've received some comments. If you can put the presentation in slideshow mode, it's one of the things that I sent you a message.
I thought I had it in slideshow.
There,
oh, no.
there we go. I can tell you, Dr. Torres, from some of the comments that we've received after the conference, Um, one of the recommendations was to, and I know you're going to speak about this in a few minutes, was to include practical information that people can use in their office. I know that, for example, Dr. Santisteban and Dr. Sembantes, they share the HSI and the SIFT models, which can be very useful. So that was one of the comments that we received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll definitely be able to share some more resources.
Okay, we have a hand up.
I don't see the questions at my end, so I don't know if you see them.
No, I see them, but
Okay, you
not so
good.
far.
There you go. Yes. What we're interested in learning the most about is what happens when you get back. It's something that I've always been interested in exploring. When you get back to work after having attended an event like this one where the energy was super high, people were really connected, there were some useful resources and knowledge shared. What happens when you get back?
So I have one. How can you work with administrators if you are willing to make some adaptations in the models that you use, but maybe administrators have difficulties in the importance of some of these adaptations?
That's a great question because oftentimes people get back from a training event and they're very excited and they want to try something new and they immediately encounter some resistance from somebody higher up the chain of command who either doesn't know about the change that the person is trying to make, or sometimes they flat out slap you in the hand and say that's not the way we do here. That we do things here. We've always done things here this way, and we're going to continue to do them this way. So there are a couple of things that you can do that I know work because I've done them as a provider, and I have many other colleagues that have. One of them is ahead of time convince administrators to go with you to the event. I mean, if you have there's a training event that has relevance to client outcomes, any good administrator is going to be interested in the clients that the agency serves having better outcomes. So it's always good if at least one administrator is present at the training event, so then they're hearing the same thing that you're hearing, and you're not having to convince them of something that they don't have any knowledge of. So when that's not possible, the other piece is to really tie whatever you're trying to make, tie it directly to client outcomes. So they care about the bottom line, right? How can we serve our clients more efficiently? How can we increase what we're doing, whether that means increase the number of clients that we're serving or improve outcomes. Substance abuse treatment programs, for example, they always strive to have higher levels of completion, lower levels of relapse in clients that complete their programs, trying to stop the revolving door phenomena, etc. If you're in a mental health treatment program, hopefully as part of your treatment plan, you're incorporating some standard assessments to monitor progress. If somebody comes to you for depression, for example, you're hopefully measuring their depression at baseline, and then at regular interviews, administering some type of depression assessment so you can quantify it, right? So if you can propose to your managers that you're going to improve quality, decrease symptomatology, and tie it to very objective markers, like, the percentage of clients are going to report an X percentage decrease in their depression scores over the next 6 months, after you incorporate the changes that you're going to do. So you got to be very objective. It's great to come back exhilarated and excited and ready to try new things, but you have to take a moment to just plan how you're going to present it. What is it that you're going to do? What do you think the impact is going to be? How you are going to measure that impact, and what it's going to result in for the clients that the agency serves, typically increases in functioning and decreases in symptoms, and what it's going to result in for the agency overall. Improved client outcomes, a better use of resources, whatever the case might be. Right? So you're selling something to the manager.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a few other questions. Moving forward, how do you see the University of Houston continue to have events of this nature?
Well, we want to continue to have them. The University of Houston, as was mentioned earlier when you were reading my bio, is a Hispanic serving institution. I don't know that this has been announced broadly outside of the university, but last week there was an announcement internally sent by the provost that we have been selected to be the new home of the inter-university program for Latino research, which is a program that's been around for about 30 or 40 years. Most recently, currently it's at the University of Chicago in Illinois, and they rotate homes every 5 or 10 years. So it's going to be here in Houston. We also, at the University of Houston, we also have a number of research centers, both in our Graduate College of Social Work, the Center for Drug and Social Policy Research, which I direct, the Center for Latina Maternal and Family Health Research, which Dr. McLean Sampson directs, and other centers in the College of Education and other colleges that work directly with the Latino community. So part of what we're trying to do is to leverage the work that we do to bring synergy to these efforts. Houston is a big city. The University of Houston is a very, very large institution, and oftentimes, unfortunately, you get the proverbial right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. So we are forming work groups that represent all of these different centers and institutes so that we can leverage our resources and bring events like this one to the community. It doesn't always have to be a big 2-day conference like the one that we put together last week. Sometimes it could be a small organization who says, hey, I want to train my staff on ABC, and they reach out to us and we make it possible. So we are here to deliver services to the community, and particularly the Graduate College of Social Work. All the work that we do is in the community, and I receive requests all the time from organizations in the community that want to provide some type of training for their staff, and we make it happen.
Perfect. Thank you. We have another one. Can you comment on the political role clients can serve in changing immigration issues? What is the role of therapy in empowering clients in this area?
Well, I mean, that's a tricky question because you want to be out there and you want to be visible. I think one of the key things that changed the way that our society, and I'm talking about really large societal change, feels about the dreamers was their willingness to out themselves. Right, to come out there and say, look, I'm undocumented, I'm a college student, I'm undocumented, and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So people started to realize that what they thought of and who is an undocumented person was erroneous and was fueled by misinformation and misperception. but that comes at a cost, right? It comes at a cost, particularly in the current political climate. So I don't know how many of you were following the events at the Texas State Legislature on Monday. They were discussing this before, and there was a group of protesters, who were doing an action. Many of them are representing pro-immigrant groups, and there was some violence in the chamber and threats of calling ICE, and so we have to be politically active. Whatever your political persuasion is, most of us work with populations that are marginalized and vulnerable, and I think we have a professional and a moral responsibility to speak up when those populations are systematically under attack by city government, state government, whatever the case might be. We also have to be careful because there are times when speaking up and becoming involved can be risky personally. The best thing to do is to do it through groups. There is always strength in numbers, right? So it's different when you join an action that's being organized by a larger group, and you're one of several 100,000 people, than when you are the one person out there with a billboard trying to deliver a message, right? We need both, but one carries more risk than the other. So we need to continue to be involved, and we need to do it smartly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have any recommendations for funding to be applied in order to implement some of the modules that were presented?
Well, yeah. Again, we are in a conservative fiscal climate right now. There's been proposal, the president's budget proposes slashing 18-20% from NIH and from NSF. I know SAMHSA's cutting back a lot of their programs. So the traditional funding sources that we could tap into to try to incorporate some of these ideas and improve patient outcomes might be drying up, at least for a little bit. However, we have to think of other local funding sources. There's always foundations in the cities that we work in that want to improve health. We can incorporate the work that we do within the broader arena of health, mental health, behavioral health. We can actually attract some funding from local folks to do small pilot projects in our agencies. There's also work that can be done that isn't very expensive, that requires few changes, a little bit of training at the agency level. I do a lot of work in Latin America, and I am always amazed by how much my colleagues in Latin America do with so little. They don't have big grants, they don't have a lot of funding streams, and yet they're able to make important changes in the work that they do and improve client outcomes. So funding isn't always the answer. I mean, there's the other side of the equation. There is agencies that have a lot of funding and that they're not doing very good work. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, I have a comment that I want to share with you. I think the symposium was fantastic. I currently work with unaccompanied minors. It made me realize that every one of these minors have experienced trauma, and I think now I am in that mentality. I see the kids with each having their own trauma and how I can help them to heal. In addition, I learned how much the importance of keeping cultural values. Sometimes we focus on making sure that they adapt to the U.S. and they lose their cultural values in the way. However, I am currently using these two important key points in my area of work. What are some of the interventions that clinicians can use when working with children that have trauma from their journey?
So that's a great segue to share some of the resources. So first I want to rescue or echo one of the comments made in the statement that you just read, which is that yes, every single one of these youth have experienced trauma. we think of big, horrible things leading to PTSD when we think of the word trauma, and to be sure, some of these youth are definitely experiencing some of that. But there are other types of traumatic events that they're experiencing as well, that they may not be as dramatic or as huge as some of the other stuff. So maybe, to be blunt, maybe not every kid that's making this journey is getting beat up and left behind for dead or being raped on the way along here, but they are separating from family. They've been under immense duress prior to making the final decision that they're going to leave their family back home and try to make this journey. And then they get here and they're given a cold welcome. They're not treated very well by some of the structures that are processing them originally, and then they're released into communities where they're not always welcome. So trauma is present at every step of the way in the lives of these young folks, and we have to think about trauma as we're working with them. There are two, I'm moving to a slide. Can you see the slide that has the 3 websites on it?
Yes.
So when you talk about intervention, so I'm going to highlight this middle one. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay, my mouse is going crazy. This middle one, which is NREB, the National, let me see if I can actually open it so we can show it. Yeah, it's an active link. This is the oh, wait, no, that one's HIV prevention. Hold on, where is the NREB? Trying to open. Oh, I copied the wrong one. But anyway, so there are both SAMHSA and the CDC have repositories of evidence-based interventions that you can search. So the 2 websites, my computer's acting a little freaky over here. The 2 websites take you to links where you can search by intervention. If you know the name of an intervention, you can search for it, and it gives you information on what the intervention is, how it was developed, what kind of training you need, what kinds of materials, etc. And if you don't know an intervention, but you know a population, an age group, a problem that you're trying to address, you can narrow your search. So you can search for substance use and trauma in adolescence, for example, and it'll give you a list of evidence-based interventions that have been shown to work to improve quality of life and decrease symptomatology in that particular population. So there's already been a lot of research done, and more of it being done all the time, on what are some interventions that really provide relief on a number of issues. So those are 2 really, really good resources. Then there's this guide that was actually distributed at the conference, and it's available through the HEDC website, which is the first one, the National Hispanic Latino, and it's the guide for conducting cultural assessments of Hispanics and Latinos. This is the one that Dr. Cervantes highlighted, and in the book itself, it gives you some guidelines for assessing protective factors, guidelines for cultural assessment, worksheets for both assessment and for intervention. So a lot of really good tools. So if you were at the conference and managed to get over to the health fair and have a copy of it, take the time to go through it, because you're going to find a lot of resources that you can put to use right away in the work that you do every day. And then there's some other resources that are under development. So we're working on a primer on evidence-based practice for frontline behavioral health workers that's going to talk about behavioral health interventions for both adolescents and adults. There's also one on cultural adaptations of EVPs. And finally, we are developing 2 modules with some national experts on cultural responsiveness. One is on substance abuse and mental health assessment and treatment of Latinos and Hispanics, and one is on the DSM-5 cultural formulation interview, a primer for direct service providers in mental health and substance use treatment settings. All of these are products of the National Hispanic Latino HETC, and the plan is for these to be available by the end of the summer. So these will be specific to working with Hispanics or Latinos. In these two websites, the NREP and the Effective Interventions, you have to search by population. So make sure that you go into the search parameters, and if the population that you're working is primarily Hispanic Latino, or that's who you're looking for, make sure you select Hispanic Latinos, the age group, the problem area, so trauma, and it'll give you a listing of them. I think we're running out of time.
Yes, we are. But I want to mention that for our participants, what we're going to do, we have a few questions left, and I'm going to send them to Dr. Torres. Maybe you can answer them in Word format, and we'll share them through our website. What we'll do is we'll include the recording of the webinar along with the PowerPoint slides and a document with the questions and the answers. Okay?
Do we have time for one more?
I don't think so. Well, we can try. Let me see.
I'll switch to Spanish. I speak a lot faster.
Okay. Here. What's the best approach in communicating intervention resources and the best way to convince them to convince someone to utilize these resources?
Well, that's similar to what we talked about, an earlier question about how do you convince the upper level folks at your agency to incorporate some changes. You know, the best is to bring in somebody who really understands what you're trying to do to facilitate a conversation about what's involved and to tie it to the goals of the agency, right? So this is, so you went to a workshop, you came back thrilled, excited, you want to try new things. That's terrific. With that by itself is not going to be enough for your supervisor or for the agency CEO to say, all right, let's change the way we do things, right? So it's going to take a little bit more effort. Now, mind you, there are things that you can do on your own. I mean, you for example, this guide for conducting cultural assessments, there are handouts and worksheets in there that you can use with your own clients as part of the work that you do every day. I want to make a distinction between that, modifying what you're doing with your clients, as long as your supervisor knows and has knowledge of it, and wanting to incorporate some of these changes more broadly throughout the agency so that other clients that are being served by other providers can also benefit. That requires a larger conversation, and that's where you have to bring in the higher ups at the agency, and you have to frame it in terms of what's the benefit to the agency. And sometimes you have to bring in an expert who can facilitate that conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Torres. If it's okay with you, we have a few more questions, but I want to highlight one of them because I think that was one of the things that came about in the conference. My takeaway from the conference was promoting awareness of services to the community, but also how do we encourage immigrants to make time for legal services, counseling, and health services when their priority might be income, housing, safety. So that was one of the things that came about from the conference, and I think the importance of case management, incorporating that into services.
Yes, absolutely. And recognizing that these immediate needs that they may have are important, but that there are things that we can be working on more than one goal simultaneously. Some of them attending to the immediate needs, and some of them trying to attend to the longer term needs that are not going to go away. So it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both.
Thank you. Okay, so again, I want to remind the audience that we'll have a recording of the webinar, we'll have the PowerPoint slides, and we'll have a document with questions and answers. So now I'm going to take over the controls. Again, we'll have a recording. You can access at our website, attcnetwork.org/Hispanic and Latino. So again, I want to thank Dr. Luis Torres for the webinar and for always collaborating with our center. You know, we really appreciate your collaboration with us. And for our participants, as you leave today's webinar, you'll be directed to complete a brief survey about your experience. We appreciate your feedback, so thank you. If you can, take the time to tell us what you thought of today's webinar. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks.